What's up? I'm David Burns. Thanks for joining me. I am pumped up, fired up, and just plumb excited about today's video, October tips, what you should be doing with your bees in October. Today I'm especially excited because today's video is all about frame manipulation. It is the secret weapon to preparing your bees for winter, and I haven't really talked much about it. Before we get into today's video, we've got some winners to announce. I'm excited. Remember the video that I made a few weeks ago where I was looking at a honey super and I found this strange looking line all through the cappings of that frame of capped over honey? And I asked you what would cause that. We have a winner. Amazing. A lot of you had some really good thoughts and really good ideas about what that could have been. Some of you said it was wax moth, you know, how they kind of go through the comb maybe. Others of you said maybe the wax separated from heat and then the bees mended it, things like that. Really good answers. But the answer, it's caused from Brassica. It's actually a bee louse. If you don't know what a bee louse is, they're kind of rare because most of our mite treatments will do away with them, but they're little bitty tiny wingless flies. They're just walking flies, but they only have 6 legs and they're very small, very hard to see. What they do, they tunnel under the cappings of the wax. And there these tiny little bee louses will lay eggs and raise their larvae, and the larvae begin to tunnel just below the caps of honey. Now, it causes no harm to the hive. We really think it's just not even worth thinking about. It doesn't change the honey, doesn't affect the bees. They're few and far between. You just see it every now and again. But let's talk about the bee louse for just a moment because it's sort of interesting to think about how these things operate in the hive. Now remember, they're very small. They're probably somewhere around the size of a mite or about maybe a tad smaller, and they hang out on the heads of the bees, like the drones, the workers. They especially love to hang out on the heads of queens. I'm not sure why. Maybe because queens are fed royal jelly their whole life. And so what they're doing is they're actually stimulating the mouth parts of the bee that they're on to cause the bees to give them some food from their honey tank. And so that's how they get by. They just kind of manipulate the bees to give them some food, then they lay their eggs and they make these little tunnels. Of all the years I've kept bees, I think this was the first time I've ever seen it on any of my hives. And I've read about it. I remember it being on the Master Beekeeper test. We spent a lot of time talking about it, learning about it, but it is so rare today. And they're interesting because they just hang out and steal food from workers. But you would never notice because they're few and far between and they're so tiny, what little bit of food that they steal from workers is nothing. So that little line was caused from Brassica, the bee louse, and guess what? Someone guessed it right away. I had to kind of conceal the comment for a minute because I wanted some other answers and didn't want anybody to look it up that fast, but we had a winner right out of the chute. We have a winner for that question. The YouTube name of the winner is Black Talon Based. So if that's you, please email us, let us know where we can send you the online ultimate beekeeping course. Good job on identifying what that's all about. We had another contest to guess what we store in the red, white, and bin that you see behind me in most of my YouTube videos. That winner will be announced coming up, so stay tuned for a chance to see who won the 2 security Yubico keys. Frame manipulation is something that I've talked about briefly, or actually quite seldom, and I really think it's important to dig into what frame manipulation is all about. If you follow me for any good amount of time, you've probably heard me slip every now and again. I slip it in there and say that really it's more important to know what's on your frames. Like some people say, how are your hives doing? You need to be able to think, well, this one has a lot of frames of brood or a lot of frames of honey. What's in the frames is much more important to me than anything else. Even when some people say, how many hives do you have? I'd rather think about how many frames I have and how many frames of honey or brood. That's more important. The number of frames can be shifted around. They can be manipulated. You can take frames out of one hive to strengthen another hive. Well, we're getting ready for winter, and this is fall. These are October tips. And I thought I'd bring out the secret weapon to how to get those hives ready for winter. And it's all about using October to manipulate the frames to make sure the bees are in the proper position to make it through winter. Now, I'm going to talk about more about this. As you can see, it's dark. We need to go inside the classroom. Let me get on that whiteboard and we're going to talk about frame manipulation. I'm going to give you some ideas, some basic understanding about manipulating your frames, and you're going to love this. Let's go, let's get started and get to work. If you follow my YouTube videos for several years now, you've probably heard me say on occasion that it's important to manipulate your frames for winter, but I haven't really spent a lot of time explaining all the details to it, and I want to do that today. Because sometimes you get all your brood, all your bees up in your top deep, even before you get into winter, and that's bad news. We want the brood below in the bottom deep, and we want all the resources like honey and protein such as the pollen up above, so that as the winter progresses, bees move up into the food. It's a little easier to explain here in the whiteboard classroom. This is a scenario of a colony that I opened last week. And so as you can see, I've got it color-coded for you. This is kind of a brood color, pollen, honey, and then an empty frame. So in the hive that I looked at, it was set up like this. So I had 3 frames of mostly brood in the bottom deep. I had a frame of pollen and pollen here. Now this was pollen and bee bread both together. And then a frame of honey, 3 frames of honey on one side, and of course a frame over here that was drawn out, but they didn't have anything in it. It was just one empty drawn out frame or comb. And in the second deep above it here, these are 10 frames, you can see here in this colony, same hive, they have a frame of honey capped over both sides, a frame of bee bread and pollen here, 4 frames of mostly brood, not totally full, but mostly capped over, some larvae, some eggs. A frame again of pollen and bee bread, 3 frames of honey over here. Now that to me says there's a lot of brood going into winter in this top deep. Now keep in mind that on top of this, I do have supers that are capped over. That's good news. They're going to go up into those supers as winter progresses. But I want to show you how I manipulate these frames so that it gives the bees a better chance to make it through winter. Now there's a lot of ways that we can manipulate these frames around, and I really believe that frame manipulation is a real skill. Sometimes we don't always want to manipulate frames. We mix up sometimes the frames in the brood nest area, and it can cause the bees to kind of be set back a little bit. We always manipulate frames when we talk about checkerboarding. If you're unfamiliar with checkerboarding, that's something that a lot of beekeepers will do in the spring, and maybe I'll come back to the classroom next spring and show you how to manipulate your frames to do some checkered boarding. But today we're going to get this hive ready for winter, a lot easier to see than if we were out there in the hive, and I'll be able to explain more things for you. Now there's a lot of ways that you can do this, and one of the things that motivates me the most in trying to set this up for winter is I want to remove at least 3 of these frames of brood down to the bottom. And I want to put more of the resources above the brood area. And of course, if I can keep my queen down here, that's nice. I would not use a queen excluder going into winter. So essentially what I'm going to say, let's go ahead and start by setting aside some of these brood frames here. Let's just move them outside the hive so that we can think about this a little better. So here are 3 frames here of honey. And so I'm motivated to leave 1 because there is some brood down here. So I'm going to leave a frame of honey and a frame of pollen and bee bread, maybe on both sides of this brood nest, these frames here. But I want to kind of consolidate it by moving more brood down here. So let's go ahead and take this sealed over, capped over frame of honey, and let's move it up to the top. We can move it here with these others and put it about right here. And now we can make room for a frame of brood that we've taken from the top. Let's set it down in the bottom like this. And now we got to keep moving more of the brood down here. So let's take one more of these and move it up above. And let's take our brood that we took out of the top box and let's move it down below like this. And that gives us about 5 frames now. So it's not a bad idea. I'm kind of feeling like I might go ahead and move another one out and swap another frame of honey. I like to keep one above it. Let's see, the best method I could think right now is to go ahead and just move this over like this. Put that there. And so what I want to do is leave this frame that is empty here. They're not going to do anything with that frame much because the season of adding more resources is over. So let's go ahead and scoot this one here, and let's scoot our honey over a little bit more. And let's put the brood here like that. And maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's go ahead and take this brood as well. So roughly we have most of our brood down here. I'm okay leaving one up here, but I'm going to put it more in the middle, probably about right along in here. And I know these aren't lined up perfectly, but it gives you an idea what I'm talking about. And let's just put as much of the honey as we can along the top area here. So maybe we have this frame of bee bread and pollen. I'm going to put my honey toward the outside walls like this. And then I'm going to put my bee bread, my pollen in here like that. I'm going to put that one frame close to the middle. This is frame number 5 here. And let's go ahead and put honey right next to it. And then we'll put our pollen here. Let's mix it up a little bit. Put our honey here. And let's go ahead and put a pollen bee bread over here. So in this scenario, it doesn't have to be rocket science or brain surgery. What we're trying to do is get more of the brood down here with a little bit of honey on both sides and some pollen. And then as the bees are going to move up this winter, they already have some of these frames to look forward to of getting into. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames of honey, 3 frames of pollen or bee bread, and we've already got a little bit of brood going up there. That's just because there's no reason to put it all down here. Now we could if we wanted to. There'd be nothing wrong with swapping this out like this. Let's put all of our honey up here like that and move all of our brood down below. If you want to do that, it's not a bad idea at all. All the brood in the bottom, a little bee bread over here, and pollen, a little honey over here. Because if they do need more resources for all of this brood, it is pretty close by and available to them. But there's just something where I feel like I want to leave a little bit of honey close to the brood nest area. And that's why I'd rather kind of give them a frame of honey down here like this to assist all the nurse bees in feeding this brood, and go ahead and move one frame up here. Now I realize that your hive might be configured differently, like you may have a different ratio of honey to bee bread or pollen or brood. So in other words, some of you may have more of the frames that are drawn out but nothing in them. If you do, try to put those toward the outside walls, because the brood nest area is going to stay centered as winter comes. So try to put any empty frames that you have against the outside walls. Let's say you had 4 empty frames. Go ahead and put them on the outside walls on both deep bodies. Now, if you're honey bound and you have mostly frames of honey like this and very few frames of actual brood, well then what you want to do is put what brood you do have in the bottom and put all your honey frames up above. If you don't have any of the frames of pollen or bee bread at all, that's just the way it's going to be, because some of the frames of honey may actually have a combination of capped over honey, nectar, bee bread, and pollen on that honey frame. But if it doesn't, you're still going to have some pollen that's found in the honey itself when the bees use it this winter. So if you don't have any frames of pollen at all, don't worry about it. but you're going to hopefully feed them like a winter bee kind that has protein mixed into it. Or you can continue to feed them in the fall for a little bit longer by mixing some more of the protein in the sugar water on top of the feeder there. Now this may be a little more unusual than what you might see. I don't know about your configuration of your hives and your frames in your hive, but in my case I have a total of 7 frames that aren't all the way full of brood, but mostly. And every frame contains about 7,000 cells. So in my case, I've got 7 frames of 7,000 potential brood. That gives me 49,000 upcoming bees of winter physiology. So I'm excited about that. That really is a good future, winter future for my bees. Now, if you only have 3 or 4 of these, and if you live in a really cold climate like I do, about 4 to 5 is as low as you want to go and still feel pretty comfortable. Let's say you have 4 frames and they're all capped over brood, ready to emerge any day now. Those are bees of winter physiology. But 4 times 7 is only 28,000 bees to stay warm all winter. So you really need about 5 or 6 is a good number. 6 is perfect. 6 gives you 42,000 bees if you have 6 frames with 7,000 potential bees to emerge soon. Those are your winter bees. 40,000 is a magic number where we feel if we have 40,000 bees going into winter, bees of winter physiology, the hive can really stay warm very nicely. So if you don't have this brood yet, that's why I always encourage you to try to feed your bees from the top to stimulate the queen and the nurse bees to really get more brood under development. If you haven't watched my other videos on September tips and August tips, I talk more about that. I'll leave a link up here where you can click on those links, especially the September tips on getting your bees ready for winter as far as bees of winter physiology. This is just about how we can manipulate our frames. And again, our main point today, October tips, is manipulate your frames, getting the brood lower, getting more of your resources above the bees so that as they move up in the winter, they're moving up into this frame, these frames here of resources. And again, I do realize the best thing that we can do is to also have a whole super on here and a winter bee kind. That way, as the bees move up, they can continue to move up into the heat of the hive and into the resources in the warmth top positions of these frames. That was really exciting. I hope that really helps you. I bet some of you have never really thought about that before, the way I explained it. You got your brood nests, and you want to get some bee bread and pollen next to that, and next to that some honey on the outside. Bees are going up for the winter. Let's put a lot of the resources above them. But let's try to get the brood as low as we can so they can move up slowly and gradually through the winter to get up into that stored resources above them. Really good tips. I hope you enjoy it. Now, I've got a lot more good videos coming up in the next week and the next few weeks about getting your bees ready for winter. But the only way you're going to find out about my videos is if you subscribe. Please subscribe, click on the bell so you'll be notified each time I make a new video, and give me a thumbs up. Let me know you enjoy and are receiving value from the beekeeping videos I'm making for you. Upcoming videos are going to include how to wrap up that hive. Should you wrap it? Should you leave your screen bottom board open? Should you close the bottom board? You know, feeding bees in the winter. How do we feed them? What do we feed them? I've got a lot of videos coming up, and if you're not a subscriber, you could possibly miss out on these upcoming important videos. So I really hope you do subscribe. I'm shooting for 100,000 people. I love to have goals and ambitions, and one of my goals is to reach 100,000 subscribers. I know it doesn't mean a ton, doesn't mean a whole lot, but it's something, a feather in the hat, you might say, that I'm working toward. So if you want to help me do that, please subscribe. Appreciate it a ton. The winner that won the 2 Yubico security keys was Diane Miller. You were so right. What do we store in that bin? Trash bags. Trash. You see, we live out in the country and we have a lot of varmints at night like coons and wild cats. If we leave our trash in our regular trash containers, They find a way to get in there, tear it apart, string it all across my 5 acres. So we have to put it in that bin where it's too hard for them to open the lid. Those of you that live in the country, you know what I'm talking about. Good job, Diane, on the guess. It was some funny guesses. Some of you guessed some cool things, like maybe that's where you store your honey. A couple of you said that's where we store our ice. Well, a little too hot here in central Illinois to store ice outdoors quite this soon. As always, I appreciate all of you commenting and leaving comments to every video, and it helps me so much. And I try to answer those comments, but as you can guess, I am swamped. And a lot of you will ask questions that are very intense, and I would have to inspect your hive to give you a really good answer. But I'm trying to answer the comments as best I can because I'm working hard for you. I want all of us to work together, all of us to be good beekeepers. I'm trying to be a good teaching source and communicator to you to help you become a better beekeeper. I do have a lot of other options for you. You can become part of my Bee Team 6 mentorship program. I'll leave a link below where you can contact me for those questions that you have, and I'll be right at the other end of the phone or email or a text message to help you. So check out Bee Team 6. Also, another way is by taking one of my online beekeeping courses. It helps me pay the bills and it helps you learn more about beekeeping. We're doing each other both a big favor. So take a look below at the classes that we offer, and I would appreciate you checking those out. I can tell that some of you asking me questions have a very, very minimal base of beekeeping fundamentals. Please take the basic beekeeping course that I have for new beekeepers online. It would really, really clarify a lot of things for you. As always, all of you mean so much to me. I'm trying to do the best I can to make as many videos as I can to help answer the questions that you have. A lot of you appreciate the polls that I give. Before I make a video, I'll ask you, what video do you want me to make? That helps me a lot to address the concerns that you have. So I kind of feel like we're friends and family. I really do. So I want you to know that I really appreciate you. Let me know you enjoyed this video. Leave some comments below, and I'll see you next time.